So this is the second video of 4, as it turns out. When Henry Vansittart died, the estate passed to his daughter, Teresa Vansittart, who married her cousin Arthur, became Mrs. Newcomen. So this video is about Mrs. Newcomen, her charitable deeds, and the development of Kortum, which of course was part of the Kirkleatham Hall estate. Now these two, they just had this one daughter, Teresa Vansittart, and she married a cousin, Arthur, as you can see there. But he died very young. Arthur Newcomen, Teresa Vansittart's husband, he was only 31 when he died. She was 35, and she was left a widow, a young widow, with 4 young children. And she never remarried. She was a very, very wealthy woman, but she was quite pious, quite puritanical in many, many ways. She used her considerable wealth for the benefit of the community. In 1857 she built Kortum Church, a magnificent building, huge steeple you see for miles, and she built it with stone from Caen in France. Caen sandstone. It must have cost an arm and a leg. Well, it cost 4,000 quid in those days, whatever that was. It was a lot of money. There's also some evidence that she built St John's Church in Middlesbrough on Martin Road there. How true that is I don't know, but I've seen a record of it. The Kortum Church, built and financed by Mrs. Teresa Newcomen. I think it cost £4,000 to build. This is the view from the south. And it was built with Caen, C-A-E-N, a town in northern France. It was built using sandstone brought all the way from there. It's obviously much harder than local sandstone, as can be seen from St Peter's Church, the parish church of Redcar, which is, when I was a kid, was in an awful state, but it seems to have been renovated since. Now Middlesbrough at this time was expanding really rapidly from in the 1830s from a farming village into a huge town with ironworks, and the nearest hospital was in Newcastle. So Teresa Vansittart was obviously concerned with the lack of medical care in Middlesbrough. So she founded the North Ormsby Cottage Hospital. It was one of the very first cottage hospitals in the country. And she founded it in 1860, and it lasted until 1981 when it was demolished. This is North Ormsby Hospital when it was first built in 1861, with monies provided by Mrs. Newcomen. There you can see the lady patronesses, as they were called, but all the local worthies. So I've never heard of. So she was from Duncombe Park in Helmsley, Wilton Castle, Worsleys of Hovingham, Mrs Newcomen from Kirkleatham, Mrs Pennyman from Ormsby Hall, Mrs Buick. They lived at Coolby Manor. And this is it in 1980, considerably extended. But it was Mrs Newcomen and her vicar, John Postlethwaite, who put up the money for this. In 1854, together with her first vicar, a guy called John Postlethwaite, she built a convalescent home on the sand dunes down at Redcar. It was a substantial building. I can remember it. Kortum Convalescent Home in the, what would be the 1920s. It was for anybody who wanted to go there. It was for, but essentially it was used by people who were recovering from illnesses, people who've worked in the mines in Eston and surrounding parts, or in the steelworks at Middlesbrough. When they were recovering from their injuries or illnesses, and illness was absolutely rife. These were, before the days of antibiotics, when people were dying of all sorts of things. In Kirkleatham Church in the turn of Vault, there are lots of graves there, or little plaques commemorating the deaths of children who died very, very young. The good old days, eh? It wasn't demolished until 1951. It was sort of painted olive green. It was a big building. It had a wonderful chapel inside. Great big vaulted roof it had. Later on, Kortum Ball was built on the site. How long that will last, I don't know. It seems to be in need of a little tender loving care, Kortum Ball. She also founded the Holy Rood Convent at North Ormsby. In fact, she took vows there as a sister. So obviously very religious. It was a Protestant order. And then to continue the religious theme, she decided to establish a community of women. Now this was based on an organisation called the Kaiserwerth Community in Germany. A woman who was nursing her mother in her old age had also been at the Kaiserwerth Community in Germany, and whether that's where she got the idea from, I don't know. But she called it the Sisterhood of the Good Samaritan. And they wore the very simple uniform of the Kaiserwerth community, like a nun's uniform. And I think it was set up in a large house on Blenheim Terrace, which was just behind Kortum Church. The first vicar of the church was a guy called John Postlethwaite, and she, together with this vicar, decided to establish a community for women based on the Kaiserwerth community in Germany. And so they built a large house in Kortum and formed the Sisterhood of the Good Samaritan. Now I think it was this white house which subsequently became White House School, run by a Mrs. Escott, whose husband, Ernest Escott, was the in charge of classics at Kortum Grammar School. It's this photograph and the information that came with it which makes me think that this was the house built by Lady Teresa Newcomen, just behind the school and the church. To note that interesting structure on the roof and this piece of information which came with it, which is underneath. Just move this down. Now you can read that piece of information there.